Hello, one and all, and welcome back to another episode of AI News, Drama, and Updates. This month is just whipping by. We're actually in the third week of July here. Now, last week was a little bit heavy, so this week I'm hoping things will be a little bit more fun and light. Let's start with a quick update on Figure. We've talked about this in the past. This is one of the many companies that are trying to build humanoid robots. I happen to catch this headline that shows that Intel is now backing them for over $9 million, and there's quite a few headlines that are somewhat similar to this. There's a lot of companies that are trying to do this, not just Tesla, not just the ones that you've probably already assumed of and heard of. And it seems like the idea of an AI-powered humanoid robot is becoming a closer and closer reality every day. Intel's managing director ended up saying about Figure that they push the boundaries of innovation. They believe that Figure has the potential to shift the way the world thinks about artificial intelligence. But this is an itty-bitty baby technology, and there's not a lot of comparative results out there. You can't really take the Boston Dynamics robot versus the Tesla robot and ask yourself which is better just yet. So we're going to keep an eye on Figure, as well as everyone else who's trying to do this, and eventually see what happens. As time goes on and companies produce more tangible results, make sure you're subscribed and stay tuned, because I'll cover it here for sure. Another update I wanted to cover is the inclusion of the 365 AI tools. Now, we had talked about this in the past. This is the ability to use AI ML-based tools in something like Excel or Word for autocomplete purposes, or really just all kinds of cool stuff. It looks like Microsoft has not only come around to charging for something like this, but they've set the price tag at $30 per user in a business type of environment. And that, for a lot of companies, is not necessarily a small amount. It might be a worthwhile investment, though, depending on what they use that service for. Now, this service is called Copilot, which is the same name as the GitHub Copilot, a little bit confusing, and it comes with a privatized version of chat, so I'd imagine that's going to keep your information from your company from leaking out into the real world. And I would come to expect over time, if it's not like this already, that the Bing chat that you're using within that corporate environment, it shouldn't be long at all before they're able to train the GPT-4 powered Bing chat tool to be more corporatized. So I'd imagine it'll probably start as a private kind of cut off from the rest of the world type of thing, but eventually it'll be tailored directly to the company. That seems to be the direction that a lot of these things have been going. Now, if you're worried about GPT-4's performance, you may have heard articles, you may have seen a lot of headlines about how it seems to be getting dumber. We actually touched on this a little bit last week. There's been rumblings from a lot of people who've been using GPT, and they've just started making that claim. It's very difficult with a closed source model to see for yourself, and there's been a lot of changes to GPT-4, whether it's regulatory or otherwise. People have, over time, gotten the impression that GPT-4 isn't providing the same level of information that it was doing previously. And despite the company making claims that they really haven't made changes like that, people aren't convinced. So on Tuesday, there was a paper that dropped from people that came from UC Berkeley and Stanford that basically had comparative performance like this. You can see the type of criteria that they were essentially prompting and seeing what kind of output they got. And they were comparing to the previous results that they got before and GPT 3.5. GPT-4, as expected, is a clear victor over 3.5, but what they were surprised to find out is they were getting different results than what they'd gotten previously in the year. And while some people might look at these results as a clear indicator that GPT-4 is just simply not what it was, that may be true, but maybe not for the reasons that we're thinking. A hypothesis out of Princeton, for example, that shows that this is potentially just the results of the fine-tuning applied by OpenAI. The results are different, but maybe not necessarily worse. Other theories might even just indicate that the novelty of GPT-4 is wearing off, the magic, so to speak. Now that we have expectations, for example, about what might come out, these expectations may not be met. And that's something that just simply didn't exist before when we didn't know what to expect. And like I mentioned last week in the tweet that I saw from the VP at OpenAI, he specifically said, no, we haven't made GPT-4 dumber. Quite the opposite. We make each new version smarter than the previous one. The current hypothesis, when you use it more heavily, you start noticing issues that you didn't see before. But like I said last week, I don't know how avoidable this is with a closed source model. They're not letting us see how the sausage is made anymore. So it might be a little bit easier for conspiracy theories to start to form. Now, a couple of days ago, I saw a tweet that Apple was working on a GPT-like service of their own, something to compete with OpenAI. This morning, as I'm looking through headlines, I see that they've already built it. So this has got to be something that's been in the works for a long time. Which is a little bit of a surprise considering they just went through that showcase where they showed off the headset and everything like that. You may even remember I specifically said they didn't mention AI at all. They talked about machine learning, but they actually kind of veered away from the terminology. So whether that was just secrecy or this is indicative of an internal shift in company policy or something like that, it looks like Apple has decided to compete directly with OpenAI. Now, from the couple of headlines we did get regarding Apple, regarding some of the decisions they made with large language models, there have been security concerns in the past, and that may be the reason why their large language model reportedly runs a little bit different. Things like OpenAI's system run mostly on the cloud. Very few parts of that service run on your internal device. And based on what I read here in the article, it seems like Apple's kind of gone the opposite direction with that. They want to try to run as much on the device as possible, whether that's for security or making use out of the Tensor chips that are in a lot of Apple products. We don't know yet. But as soon as I find out, I'll share it with you guys here. This was such a cool surprise last night. I saw a tweet from Sam Altman about these custom instructions that came out. And basically what this allows you to do is use ChatGPT with beginning context. If you're a Plus user and you want to use GPT-4, you can go into the beta settings and you can activate these custom instructions. Completely optional, but it allows you to fill out these two boxes. And that's very powerful for setting the tone for every new GPT-4 conversation you decide to have. This is probably extremely great for heavy users who tend to use similar prompts over and over again in different conversations. And this, believe it or not, can be combined with the code interpreter or the plugins or any of the other tools that already exist within that GPT-4 arsenal. I haven't had a ton of time to play with this just yet. I just started messing with it last night, but being able to put things in there like please only answer with very blunt responses, for example. All of my output became very, very short, very direct and to the point. So you can imagine how powerful something like this could be if you're really trying to tailor that output. Especially for people using the code interpreter, for example. You can tell it exactly what type of language you prefer, you can give it an idea of what you expect, and of course that context, just like with GPT-4, gets added right into the mix. So I'm not sure exactly how many people might have been asking for something like this, but this is a welcome feature, and great value for people who are already paying for GPT-4. Now, switching gears from LLMs completely and just talking about a Google feature that is going to be coming down the pipe in the future. I don't have any personal experience with Google Meet, but it looks like in the world of team-to-team communication or person-to-person voice calls, things like that, we'll soon be able to look at AI-generated backgrounds as an option that exists. Now, if you're like me and you don't use Google Meet, of course, this isn't immediately exciting news for you. But if you're using Teams or Slack or Discord or any of those other video calling services, this might be something that you start to see get integrated. As one form of a certain service innovates, you'll normally see the others try to keep up. So I thought this was interesting enough to make note of, even though I don't have any visual examples for you. And I imagine we're soon going to see generative AI backgrounds for a lot of those other competing services. I did want to share something that I found in the world of quantum computing this week, and this has to do with AI-driven quantum computing mixed together and drug research. Now, quantum computers aren't quite there yet in terms of general application. You can't just build a quantum computer and do with it the same things you would do with a normal computer. They have to be built specifically to accomplish a task, from my understanding. And so we've got Giro, which is an AI-driven biotech company. Now, the way this is written seems to be they're testing the waters to see what the possibilities of something like this are, but things seem to be promising for right now. According to the article, the team explored whether this hybrid generative AI could suggest unique chemical structures that are synthetically feasible to process drug-like properties. So just looking at drugs, trying to find patterns and trying to suggest new patterns that we could test if we haven't already. So it sounds like a quantum brainstorming type system where they're just going through every possible permutation. I can't pretend to fully understand it, but when you combine this insane processing power, and you combine that with the pattern recognition we see in ML-based AI, the possibilities are insane, as you can see. The writer strike is ongoing. We've talked about it a couple of times now, and it seems to be still at a standstill without any real decisions being made. With the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild both striking together for the first time in 60 years, that's a very powerful alliance, and that puts a major crimp in the entertainment industry. Now, we've reached a point now where they've been over 70 days on strike, so we're starting to see stories about different things that have taken place. One story that came out recently in regards to Tom Cruise, whatever your thoughts are on him, it looks like he was ahead of the game in terms of arguing for the rights of actors against AI. And based on what I've read, this was before it was announced that that was the intent of what these studios are trying to do. To refresh your memory very briefly from last week, the studios announced that they'd like to be able to take likeness rights from a single extra, a background actor, and use that in perpetuity forever, without paying them again and again and again. So essentially they can own a digital person, so to speak. Tom Cruise, as a serious actor, of course, had a big problem with that. But that's only part of the issue. Streaming services like Netflix and Hulu and things like that, and the monies associated with those services is the biggest issue that they need to come to terms with. The people at the top are dragons hoarding their gold, and they're refusing to give up any of it. You may not remember that Netflix started as a kiosk service with DVDs outside of a Walgreens or whatever, and it eventually grew into the digital streaming service that we know. And unfortunately, a lot of the paperwork that's written for writers and actors in terms of how they get paid is based on these smaller kiosk-based services, I guess, and they're just making pennies to the dollar. And what you end up with are these executives who've done nothing, and they are just making money on the work of other people. And not a little bit of money, like all of the money, which is kind of weird. That's the big problem. In addition, now they also want to use AI and steal people's souls or whatever. So if it wasn't really clear what the strike was, that's the premise of what's going on here. And if you want to get a sense of how evil some of these dragons hoarding gold is, check this out.
Andrea, tell me what is going on with these trees at this lot.
So on Barham Boulevard, where our Barham Gate is, all of the trees that we're providing shade to our demonstrators and to pedestrians have suddenly been cut down.
Literally the same week that it's like a 95, 100-degree heat wave in the valley, when we've got picketers, they decide to prune just the trees in front of where we picket. That's a weird coincidence, specifically the trees under which strikers are walking.
Again, Adam, I don't believe in coincidences.
Not only was this not a coincidence, but the city controller looked into the tree cutting, and this was obviously done by purpose, specifically to make it more inconvenient to strike. This is an instance of somebody just trying to get in the way of other people standing up for themselves. So whatever your views of capitalism are, there's a great example of what it actually is. There's a South Park episode that made a huge name for itself this week because it wasn't actually a South Park episode. A group called The Simulation put together a program that can design an entire show from start to finish with characters and script and everything like that. And that's what they've demonstrated by using South Park as a demonstration tool. Now, as you can see here, and I've got it muted so we can just kind of leaf through it, it looks very similar to a South Park episode. You can actually see everything at the bottom as it's written. You can see the script and everything as it's going. Even the special effects, which are common to South Park, got captured here. Now, they're obviously combining a lot of different services to get all of the moving parts here. You've got large language models writing scripts, you've got image generators probably generating each individual frame. I don't know the exact tools they use to put everything together, but they did end up with an episode that's over 20 minutes long, and it is very similar to a South Park episode. Now, it's obviously not the same, and you can tell the difference, but it's got a lot of people concerned about the future of television and entertainment. And in a way, this is similar to what the writer's strike is up against as well. You know, we're looking down the pipe of a future that has an endless amount of entertainment, but what is the level of entertainment? You know, I heard someone say last night that AI is as bad as it's ever going to get. It's only going to get better from here. So if you look at this as a decent South Park episode, I mean, they're only going to get better, right? Now, personally, I think what'll happen is we'll see AI entertainment and we'll see human entertainment, and those things can exist and be separate from each other. I don't necessarily think one is going to completely replace the other. I think they'll affect each other. But I'm no Nostradamus, so we'll have to see how things pan out. Also in the world of art, it was surprising to learn that GPT-4 kind of held back. Now, OpenAI owns DALL-E 2. They have no issue with AI image generators. They were one of the first to release an AI image generator in the form of DALL-E. But they are holding back on including GPT-4's image features, which should be either multimodal capacity, or maybe it's just a DALL-E prompt within the GPT-4 system. We'll kind of have to see how they roll it out when they do. But they are concerned about privacy issues, as it turns out GPT-4 can recognize certain individuals. Also noteworthy here, they're working with a startup called Be My Eyes, which is developing an app to describe images to blind users. So if that's something that's of interest to you or anyone in your family, just be aware that that's something OpenAI is working on. Now, it looks like some of the concern and some of the delay here may come directly from that inclusion. You know, there's different states with different laws surrounding identifying people, and it looks like if you have a Wikipedia page, it's going to know who you are and it's going to be able to speak about you. So they're working out, I think, some of the kinks there. But as you can imagine, the moment that it goes to describe somebody inaccurately, it's going to make a ruckus as well. And that's another concern that they have. OpenAI has already been under siege and being sued by a number of different people for various different things. And while it's unlikely any of those things are going to pan out, it's got to be annoying to get sued all the time. Now, I should also mention here that multimodal models are not a new thing anymore. If you access Bard, you can upload an image and it can make sense out of that or even describe it to you as it is right now. And Bing's GPT-4 service can do something similar as well. I even saw Bing solve a CAPTCHA and then go back and say, wait, I'm actually a robot, I can't solve this for you. So that was interesting. With all the talk about AI being the end of the world that's coming, the existential threat to humanity that the world has always told us it was going to be, and yada yada, it's nice to see that there is an open letter that kind of goes in the opposite direction, I guess. Those of you who've been watching along have seen a lot of news out of the UK or the EU about regulatory issues or worries or fears in general. And this open letter, I guess, aims to solve that by just basically letting the government of the UK know, hey, it's not all that bad. It's not going to be the existential threat everyone is saying it's going to be. I do wonder what the worldview on AI would be if James Cameron hadn't have made the movie Terminator. That movie, that idea, and how it all rolls out, anytime we talk about this type of technology, that's at the forefront of everyone's mind. Taking a look at the letter, and you can see the entire thing there highlighted in green, it's tiny. It's not very much a letter as it is just a statement, a couple of sentences. Anyways, I was speaking about James Cameron, the movie Terminator. I did want to point out that he was quoted just recently as saying, "I warned you guys in 1984 and you didn't listen." But immediately as I read this, and I recall actually telling you guys this when it happened, but James Cameron made use of AI himself for the most recent Avatar 2 movie. I'll link this in the description as well, but to create a realistic rendering of the Pandora universe, Cameron has made use of AI's computing capacity. So as I saw this, I thought it was a really interesting quote for a guy who's also still making use out of this technology despite being, a doomsayer, I guess. But as we talk about real laws and regulations, or at least the things that are going to affect us, I did want to bring up that 7 AI companies did actually make specific commitments to the White House regarding their safety measures. And I'll cover what those are here, who those companies are. I'll start by saying that 7 companies is certainly far from all of them, especially if Apple, for example, is not on this list, and they also have something now that can compete with OpenAI. I didn't see Stability AI on this list, or Stability Foundation, whatever they're calling themselves nowadays. Most of the names are the ones you expect. Google, Microsoft, Anthropic is there, they built Claude. And OpenAI, of course, they're on the scene. This agreement does appear to be completely voluntary for now, but it is a list of 8 commandments, I suppose, that they've all agreed to. A lot of these do actually make sense, invest in cybersecurity, test for bad behavior, things along those lines. I'm not sure how people are going to react to the idea of watermarking, audio and visual type stuff. We'll see how that pans out. I'm sure open source alternatives will be created as a response. As this is voluntary, it'll be interesting to see which companies allow these ethical rules and things like that to affect their bottom line. In the United States specifically, there are a lot of companies that are unethical in nature, and in a lot of cases, that's not even illegal or frowned upon. We are the country that makes and sells all the weapons, for God's sakes. And I'll end today's video on this note, and I don't know if this was at all related to this meeting or the changes that OpenAI has agreed to make, but the head of trust and safety, Dave Wilner, actually stepped down. Now, of course, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to just assume that this is why the guy stepped down. As this story develops, if this story develops, I'll let you guys know here. I just thought the timing of something like this was really interesting. He's the head of trust and safety, and today was the White House meeting about trust and safety. But what I can tell you about Dave is he worked at OpenAI for a year and a half, and his resignation, the way he described it on LinkedIn, sounded very high level, very professional. The article does talk about some firm stances he had on what is hate speech, what is free speech, things like that, but I don't want to assume that that's in any way related to what happened here. And like I said, if I find out more, I'll let you guys know. As far as today, I really appreciate the time you guys spent with me. If you liked today's video, please hit that like button, and I'd appreciate a subscription if you haven't done that already. But that'll be it for me today. I appreciate you all, and I'll see you next week for another AI news, drama, and updates. Thank you for watching.